This is the ISG Digital Dish.
Welcome to the Digital Dish,
a podcast for women's voices and perspectives in the digital world. I'm Lois.
I'm Missy.
And I'm Jeannie. And we want to make sure smart women and their points of view were being heard. Hi, everybody. I'm laughing because Missy just told me that's how she rolls.
How I roll.
That's how she rolls. Welcome back to the Digital Dish. There is so much going on right now, Missy, in the world.
Yes.
Spring is hopefully coming, though it doesn't appear that way because Missy's in Texas, I'm in Chicago, and I think you have worse weather.
It's all over the place. It was 37 3 days ago, and then yesterday was 85 and I was at the pool.
Oh.
We have tornado warnings one day, hail coming down, and then the next it's sunny, and we just never know what to expect.
And then I was thinking about AI, this whole big thing with AI is coming out. That's a trip, right? We have to have an episode about that.
We do. We definitely do. At the end of last year, we started hearing a lot about Chat GPT.
Right.
And people being able to interact more like the everyday person with artificial intelligence and agents and chatbots. So it's just exploding right now, all the way into the spring. And it's not going to go away. So what do we do about that?
And then the other thing is we just interviewed somebody who just told us how she just got totally addicted to the podcast. So great news. I love that.
Ah.
Yes.
Well, that's amazing because you never know your listenership. We don't have the exact persons per click, individuals at that level. We just know the clicks that we get in the data. So It's really cool to know when you actually have a fan.
Yeah.
Dare I say fan?
I think we have a few fans. I know my cousin listens to it and then calls me and tells me things about it. So.
All right. Thanks, cousin.
Yes. We have a great interview coming up where Lois interviews Stephanie Marcon. And you know Stephanie, right?
I know Stephanie. When I first joined ISG, I actually worked for Stephanie in the organizational change management team.
Okay. Well, she's got a lot of interesting things talking about relationships in the workplace.
Oh.
And she has some facts and figures. She talks about different generations and things. So I'm pretty excited for this one. And I think she's got a lot of great points of view on this. So
now, when you said relationships in the workplace, maybe just because of where I am in my life, I instantly went to what kinds of relationships, Jeannie? You want to clarify?
Yes, thank you. She talks a lot about how to enable the relationships that make work enjoyable.
Okay.
Everybody interprets that a little differently, but I think the whole point of it is to trust and to enjoy what you're doing at work and enjoy the people you're working with. That's how I took it from the discussion that she had on how different generations can work. So,
yes, I'm so excited about this. Enabling the relationships that make work enjoyable.
I think that's the title.
Okay.
All right. Enjoy, everybody.
Today we have Stephanie Marcon here, actually, who is one of my fellow colleagues at ISG. And Stephanie runs our ISG Experience Center, which, maybe she'll have a chance to tell us exactly what that is. But maybe before we jump into that, Stephanie, welcome. And can you give us just a little bit of background? Who is Stephanie and how did she get to this point of being with me on this podcast?
Yeah, sure. So I've worked at ISG for about 7 years, but I've spent a large part of my career in what would be called organizational change management. I really gravitated towards this because I had a background in systems implementations and I was in project management. Noticed stakeholders were not always represented. So I naturally gravitated towards change management type of work. I am very passionate about employees' experiences. So this role that I have now is a really good fit for me. When we think about employees' experiences, especially in today's world, we really need to think about how to better enable their experiences so they're enjoying work. And I say that because just like anything, we want to enjoy work. We spend so much time at work. We want to enjoy work. And there are many facets to how to get there. So that can be through some of the technology that's enabling it, the relationships you have at work, And what we do at the Experience Center is also looking at relationship health with complex B2B relationships, because relationships do matter, just as in our personal relationships. If we're enjoying them, we're going to stay in them and they're going to be more productive.
Well, this is such I think an important discussion right now around it's the people in the organizations or really ourselves, how we feel at work. I mean, I think there's been a pretty big change over the last 2 to 3 years because of COVID. I was looking at something to prep for this discussion where Gallup, which is a DC based company, they did a survey of people to say, how do you feel? How do you feel? We've gone past COVID now a few years. Do you feel like you're ready to jump into work? We're kind of getting back to the pre-COVID. And they actually said that trust in their employers have plummeted. Only 24% of people feel like their employers care about them. And it feels like, how are we able to be our best selves, not only just at work, but just be our best selves overall? It's been challenging with we're having to work at home and the ability to build relationships with people, like you said, the experiences that we have. It just seems like, are we at an all time low? Are there things that we really need to focus on that we can do for ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're starting to see some big trends here. I like to think about the incongruency, which COVID accelerated, with flexible work. On the one hand, it's been incredibly beneficial, in particular for women who, have all these responsibilities at home, like childcare or elder care, or supporting their communities in other ways. But at the same time, this concept of being always available. So some of the self-care is really being aware of, if you're always on, you need to set boundaries. So setting boundaries at work is something that can be very helpful. And that is something that I think work or organizations themselves are starting to look at, because that is a culture aspect at work. If your work rewards you for always being available, you're going to see a lot of burnout. If leaders in an organization are looking at and representing at, walking the walk, if they're setting boundaries in their personal life, their employees are going to follow suit. And that's actually going to help a lot with self-care and prevent burnout.
Well, how do we do that? Because I think I'm probably victim to this like many others. I work out of my office that's 6 feet away from my bedroom. So, I get up in the morning, maybe I'll take a shower, and, I just walk down the hallway. And it's so hard, when I had a commute, there was a boundary, right? It was a way to get my head in the place of work. And then on the way home, it was a way to get my head in the place of home. And it was easy, but it's hard. It's almost like that work life balance. It's not even a work life balance anymore. It's almost like it's just one big integration of things happening all the time. So, how do we set boundaries? How can we start with ourselves? Like you said, it'll influence those around us, but what can we do with ourselves to try to set those boundaries?
An easy thing to do is block time off. But just as you mentioned, you used to have time in a commute to block time off. You were driving in your car or taking the subway, whatever, however you were doing that. And that would give you this time to change roles. And we're finding ourselves changing roles more frequently because in the middle of your day, might now be picking up your kids and then going back to work. Or you might have dinner and get on a meeting after. So just the simple act of blocking some time off, take your dog for a walk or, walk around the block, set up that time to go do a workout. Those are things that we could do, or just schedule time, to have coffee with a friend, have lunches. I think we take for granted that when we were working more in the office space, think about when you would take lunches. You did that. You would even go down to a break room or you would go out to lunch. We don't do that anymore. And we're starting to see the impact of that, or we already have been with the burnout, because we're not doing that. And it's because we never really had to schedule the time before. It just naturally happened. But now we should be doing that. So consciously looking at your week and saying, okay, I'm going to walk my dog every day. I'm going to take a coffee break with a girlfriend once or twice a week. And that doesn't have to be a major effort where you trek across town. It could even be just setting 30 minutes aside with a coworker and having coffee and just talking about something other than work. But those are important.
And those are great. I actually I think it was on another podcast. They said the benefits of moving around during the day, which I think probably us on the phone, if we get above 3,000 steps, before noon, boy, that's really doing something, right? Because we sit so much in our desk. And so they said, even, if every couple hours you went, and if you had a treadmill in your house, go walk for 10 minutes, like it doesn't have to be a big deal in between meetings, just that is so much healthier for your body. And it also clears your mind, right? It also gets you out of what you were doing and you come back feeling a little bit more refreshed. What's interesting though is my kids I guess they're considered Gen Z. I think Gen Z is something like 10 to mid 20s, something like that. They're now starting to come into this workforce. And, already we're in a different way of working because of COVID. They grew up, I guess, yeah, they had COVID through college, high school, college, and now they're entering the workforce. I wonder how that's going to change the way we all work.
Yeah, the demographics right now, even without COVID, I'd say we were really at an interesting inflection point because we've got many different generations in the workforce. And as you said, Gen Z is now in the workforce. They're in their 20s. They're starting to enter the workforce. In the next 2 years, they're supposed to make up about 30% of the workforce. Millennials make up the next part of it. So that's over 60% of the workforce is millennials and Gen Z. The things they care about and what they're looking for at work and the way they've been brought up is going to have a significant impact to work. And it's also something that organizations really do need to be paying attention to because they care more about personal health. They care very much about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workforce, a sense of belonging. So this is where technology is going to be fascinating because it can really help as well. I mentioned the incongruency with remote work and hybrid work. More workers are feeling isolated than ever before, even if there is a benefit of, being able to have flexibility. But this younger generation, because they've grown up in a digital world, they have their own way and they're more comfortable with, working virtually or just socializing virtually. But they've also very much care about belonging and feeling like they're part of something because they're interested in that equality and inclusion. They really care, probably more so than any other generation, about equity at work. So those are things that we're really going to see flavor the work in the near future. We talk about this workforce, but when you think about boomers also, that's another aspect of the workforce. They're the most experienced, but they're also hitting retirement age. But what does retirement look like today? Many of them are not looking for just completely giving up work and going to the golf course. They are looking for ways to enrich their own life and potentially looking for part-time flexible work where they can contribute back to the community in a way that is rewarding for them. So that's also going to flavor work in the future, where I think we're going to see more part-time flexibility with highly skilled knowledge workers that don't want to be 100% at work anymore. So all of those things with the different generations, it's really going to change the flavor of what corporations look like, how they're going to engage their workforce. It's going to be interesting. I mean, I think in the next couple of years, we're going to see some big changes. I think focus on that inclusion and how to do that will be very key.
So the word belonging kind of stuck in my head because you said, not only is that important for the Gen Z and the influx of new people coming in, but also as you talked about those who are retiring, I think of myself, I've been in, working for now almost 30 years. And, you start to think about what do you want to do next? You think about your legacy. Like, what is it that I can give back to either the organization I'm in or give back to, like you said, the community or give back to, a particular cause that's important. So that workforce now, the belonging is, and almost as you said, bringing together people who have different goals and objectives and what they expect from their environment and the way they interact with people, as well as this tremendous expertise that you want to take advantage of. But they're all volunteers, right? They're there simply because it's enriching for them. That is going to be a challenge. That's going to be a challenge to be able to create that sense of belonging, that sense of team in a very diverse environment, while also looking at not at people as assets, but as human beings who want to be there, and you're encouraging people to want to be there to share their experience. That's going to be a tall order for any company to have to grapple with.
You're right. It is going to be a tall order. And I think we're already starting to see trends that are going to help with that. Mentoring programs, as you think about, pairing people that have that experience that don't necessarily want to be 100% at work anymore, giving them the opportunity to mentor, and they can be formal mentor programs to help people that do want to learn from others. That will also ultimately form a sense of belonging for both, because they're contributing and they're getting what they need out of that type of program. There's some interesting trends going on right now with women returning to work, because we go back to COVID. I mean, that was an extreme disruptor for women in particular as primary caregivers. And I don't just mean, for childcare, but for elder care or other family members. Boomers and Gen X were definitely in that, what we would consider sandwich generation, especially Gen X, which is right now in their prime because they're in their 40s and 50s in the workforce. There is this concept of what they call returnship. So they're enabling women to come back to work after they've taken several years off. But because of the talent strap that we're experiencing right now, and this war on talent and trying to attract and retain good talent, companies are recognizing that there are some really great women out there that have good experience that want to return to the workforce, but they might need some additional help. And that's where some of these mentoring or sponsoring programs, where they're paired with someone in an organization and they're given an opportunity to work, to find their way, to also have that voice and to provide feedback to the organization about how they can best contribute, but what's going to make it work for both the corporation and them as women that are caregivers or have other obligations outside of work. So I think those types of programs are going to continue to grow in organizations. I see that being a trend that we're going to see in upcoming years. And I think that's ultimately going to benefit everyone. It's going to give the Gen Z that sense of belonging and also the mentorship that they might need as they're going into the workforce in a way that's going to resonate for them, because it doesn't have to be at the office physically there doing things. There will be other ways to do that. Something else that we're starting to see is ultimately, it plays back into that self-care, is there'll be more opportunities to do virtual fun things. I think we've already seen it. I've already been invited to, virtual wine tastings or chats where they're doing something fun, but they're also infusing it with information that, needs to happen, leadership development, infusing that with things that the company needs so that it's making it fun and enjoyable and creating a bond or a sense of community within work. So I think those trends are going to start to evolve and grow as we see in the next couple years, especially with technology enabling those things.
That sounds great. And I think there's probably many who are listening to this thinking, how can I make a difference where I'm at? This sounds like something I want to get involved in. I want to be able to make a change in my environment. I want to be able to create that atmosphere that myself and my teammates and my group can participate. What advice do you have for anyone who's listening to think, what are the steps I can do to make that impact or make that change in my environment?
I think there's kind of the grassroots, and then there's also the more formal. So look for opportunities in your organization. If they have a mentorship program, participate, sign up for it. If they don't, maybe bring it up. And then on the grassroots level, I'd say maybe start doing small groups. If you're a leader in your organization, maybe set aside once a month coffee chats. Be that example in self-care. Talk about, I'm taking a break, I'm going to work out. That is how culture gets changed, is you have to walk the walk. If you're, already in a role where you're doing something like this, maybe invite other people to it. So if you're having those once a month coffee chats, let other people know. So those are some small ways to do it. And I think recognizing if enough people ask about a mentorship program, and it doesn't have to be a super formal mentorship program, it could be co-mentors or things like that. If enough people ask an organization, they're going to start paying attention to it. The statistics are out there that mentoring programs do help with retention and they help with belonging. So I think as more and more organizations hear about this from their own employees, they're going to start doing something about it.
Exactly. Love it. Well, this has been great, Stephanie. Thanks so much for joining me. This has been, I think inspiring for all of us to think about how we ourselves can fit into this still ever changing and sometimes difficult way of mixing work and play, but yet there's some really great ideas of not only can we help ourselves, but others around us. So thank you so much for joining us today. And I look forward to hearing about your dog walk.
Thanks. Thanks for having me, Lois.
Hey, Missy.
Hey, hey, hey.
So, what'd you think of the interview with Stephanie?
Oh, wow. It actually took me back to the days where I worked very closely with Stephanie in OCM, in organizational change management. And what we would do, we would literally put it on the schedule, our times, as walkie-talkies. So if neither of us need to share our screen and we just knew we needed fresh air and we were both in pretty warm climates.
Right.
I was in, Dallas or Miami and she would be in somewhere in, I want to say Arizona.
Sure.
We would take the time to intentionally schedule our times to talk while we were walking our dogs or just walking outside or taking a break. We would actually get a lot of work done.
Yeah.
And then create all kinds of new ideas. It's like pew, 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 like firing off in your brain to just get a different perspective and literally take a walk. So it just took me back to those moments. And I thought, I need to start doing those again.
I love that. I really thought that was important to say because I actually walk my dog during internal meetings. I don't do it so much with clients, but I think with internal meetings,
That's right.
I think it's fine. And I think walking your dog, it does keep something about the action of walking keeps your brain firing for some reason. And I like that.
Well, you know me geeking out on the neuroscience.
Okay.
Every time you're a swimmer, right, Jeannie? Every
Right,
time you're
I am.
crossing the midline of your body, and that's what walking does, you're stimulating more gray matter in the brain. So dancing, walking, running, even just stretching, it actually helps to fire better with your neurons and hardwire your circuitry. It's very healthy.
That's awesome. I thought what was also interesting. Well, I wanted to ask you because I think companies, because she talked a lot about how companies have to adjust to the new reality. My question is, what do you think the new reality is going to be? I mean, I think it's anyone's guess. I think it will play out in the next few years. But what's your thoughts on that?
So speaking as me, Missy,
Hmm.
as a millennial, I was actually recently told I was a geriatric millennial. So when I think
Oh my
geriatric,
God.
I think of
Is
speaking of
that
walking.
is that a compliment or not? I can't tell.
I'll take it as a compliment. It's a seasoned wisdom.
Lots of wisdom.
Like we weren't born digital,
Right.
but pretty close to the edge, right? I had a cell phone. I didn't have the pager or the beeper, but I had a cell phone by high school, and I can understand where this next generation is coming from, wanting, number one, autonomy and agency. So I think of this workforce and the workforce of the future as a basic supply and demand. And you think of like a buyer's market for home ownership or a seller's market. When I think of that with the economics and the exchanges of an employer and employee relationship, it feels like the demand is for the employee. And so the employee gets to set their rider, what they will and won't do. And having that autonomy and agency to decide, I need to come into an office, or I need to work from anywhere, or I need to work from home remotely, or I need Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays in, Monday, Friday out, whatever that may be. This generation, my generation, is much more vocal about our needs. We're so vocal about social things around ESG and corporate social responsibility. And that also plays into diversity, equity, inclusion.
Right.
And then when they double click down on that, it plays into individuality. So it really is no longer having this blanket, this is what works for all women.
Right.
This is what works for all employers. This is what works for all minority. It is really just about what does that individual need and how to create these options, whether it's a bring your own device to work, right? BYOD, or just helping the employee to work at their optimal self. I think that's what's going to continue to happen, and the employee is going to drive the employer's decision.
Yeah, I think so too. But I think what's interesting is me being on, as you're a geriatric millennial. Okay, and I am a young boomer, I think. I'm on the tail end of the boomer generation, I think. But I just think, like I look at my peers and I think, oh, what's going on with them? Are we are we open to the younger generation and ideas? And I think that's to me is going to be an interesting contrast in the workplace. I think everybody has to take it separately, but I'm really open to it. I think it's
Yes.
great because I don't look at everybody in terms of age or anything like that. But you have to take that experience into consideration. But I really think that's going to be the challenge to me.
Do you enjoy your work day? How do you get a break in your day?
Oh, I love my work day. My break, here's my side hustle right now, what we're doing.
Yeah.
That's my side hustle and it's really fun. But I do enjoy my work. I mean, I wouldn't keep doing it if I didn't.
Yeah.
I meet with clients. My whole team is every age and nationality we could think of, and I'm
Yes.
thrilled because that makes it
Yes.
interesting to me.
When it's those times where it's just high pressure and high intensity, some of the things that Lois was asking Stephanie about, just taking that break for less than 10 minutes.
Yes.
For me, scheduling it helps.
Yeah.
So if I know I have a high intensity client or something like that, or there's just a lot of pressure or a deadline coming up, I will put on my calendar like a 10-minute one-on-one for myself. And I have these cool meditation apps that I can use. I guess some people take walks, some people do jumping jacks, some people need power naps.
Some people swim.
Some people
swim in the middle of the day.
Swim in the middle of the day, but getting that exercise in. So I think those are my biggest takeaways from Steph. That's what I call her. Steph was about really like calendaring it. So if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. Taking the time to make sure that you put those breaks in. even if it's not like, oh, it's stressful, it's a bad day. You just, like I said, you get ideas, just fresh insights,
Right.
just changing your perspective and getting in nature, just moving differently. So putting it in writing and then talking about it to your colleagues.
Yeah.
Normalizing it so it's like, hey, Jeannie, I am going to go for a workout on my break. If you need me on camera this next call, let me know. We might need to reschedule it because I'm going to be a sweaty mess.
Right.
Something
Exactly.
like that. Or just
Yeah.
like making it normal to take breaks versus the badge of honor that I think happens in technology and digital and consulting, where you'll hear a lot of our male colleagues, very successful and gotten to where they are in leadership, will say things like, oh, I can't remember the last time I took a full week vacation. So it's whether like you are celebrating or praising this kind of burnout culture
Right.
versus
Right.
acknowledging that it's okay to take the rest that you need.
Yeah, I used to work at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange a long time ago, and that was crazy. And it was just nonstop environment. And I kept thinking, this can't be a good, sustainable activity. It was just crazy all the time. So I wanted to move on to one other question I have, because I
Okay.
really want to talk about mentoring. I always feel like mentoring programs that are conceptually pushed on people don't work as successfully as finding or being a mentor to someone in a more organic way. But I also understand there has to be some kind of structure to allow that organic thing to happen. And I think that gets harder when you're more remote. So that's what I wanted to throw out. That was a question I was thinking.
Dang. Yeah, Jeannie, I think you hit on something great because in my HR days, it was table stakes to make sure you had programs in place, right? Like a network resource group or a mentorship program or a sponsorship program. But you also could create almost like a mixer environment
Yeah.
within those programs. It was not, Missy, you're going to be paired with Jeannie. Jeannie, you're going to be paired with Lois. And then Lois, you're going to be paired with Missy. It was, here are some topics that I'm interested in. Are you an expert in these topics? Or here's some areas that I want to grow in. Are you already in that area? And then you throw everyone together in a room as like a happy hour or some sort of event over a lunch or a coffee.
Okay.
And people start to mix and mingle and you find your person.
Right.
But you're right, you have to structure it when you're remote. And it's not as organic.
Right.
But it is still, I think, useful. And a thing that I found that's helpful or that I've heard from other people that's helpful is, asking someone that you get assigned to introduce you to other people.
Yeah.
That law of attraction can still work. So if Missy is assigned to Jeannie, I don't just say, Jeannie, you are my mentor, but here's what I'm looking for. Who else might I be able to talk to?
Yeah.
Or vice versa.
Well, I think that's a challenge for everybody, especially in this remote world, because I think mentoring also comes from the day to day and understanding what the other job is and kind of having that regular interaction. So I think it's something that's going to be a challenge for companies, but I think it's important. I think just people need to think about how they build those mentoring programs. That's all I was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But anyway, I enjoyed that conversation with Stephanie.
Yes.
Do we want to add anything else, or this is a wrap, I think?
This is a wrap. Yeah, Lois did so great. Stephanie left us with a lot of nuggets and looking forward to see what the listeners think.
Yeah. All right. Talk to you later, Missy.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you like our podcast, please subscribe and rate and review us. Thank you.